In this movie, we're going to talk about two primary interface elements in the Revit user interface, the ribbon and the quick access toolbar. Now, the quick access toolbar is displaying currently, but most of the tools are grayed out, and the ribbon is also mostly unavailable. So in order to talk about these two interface elements, we really need to have a file open in the background. So I'm just going to click the architectural template link here and just create an empty architectural file. Now, as you can see, the interface changes when you do that, and across the top of the screen is where we find the quick access toolbar at the very top, and then beneath that, the ribbon, which is organized into tabs, starting with architecture on the left and ending with modify on the right. So let's start by talking about the ribbon a little bit. The ribbon is really the primary interface element that you have in Revit, and all of the commands that you're going to access in the software are located somewhere on the ribbon. Now, I'm on the architecture tab to start off with. You may not have exactly the same tabs that I do. It depends on which version of Revit you have installed. But if you have the suite version, you'll have systems and structure tabs as well. If you just have Revit architecture, you might not have the systems tab, for example. But you'll always have things like the insert tab, the annotate tab. So there are some common tabs that appear in all versions of Revit. Well, back here on the architecture tab, let's just take a look at the organization of the ribbon. The ribbon is organized into what we call panels. So the first panel you can see here is the build panel, and it encompasses all of the buttons and controls that would allow you to create things in your Revit model, architectural elements. So we've got walls and doors and windows all on that build panel. There's also the circulation panel and the model panel. And as you can see that each one of them groups like commands together. Now, if we scan over a little bit further, there's a panel over here called Room and Area, and you can notice that it's got this small little drop-down arrow next to it. Now, that doesn't occur on some of these other panels. Now, notice that this one, when I highlight it, it actually highlights in a bluish color. These don't. Well, this is actually what we call an expandable panel. So when you click that, you'll see that there's actually some other buttons stashed away underneath that expandable portion of the panel. So these are less frequently used commands, and they kind of tuck them away under this little expandable portion. So be on the lookout for those. Now, another thing you want to be on the lookout for, and I'll have to switch tabs to show you this, is, for example, if I go over here to the Annotate tab, sometimes you'll have a small little icon that appears right here. Now, this is the text panel, and you'll see that when I hover over this little icon, it says Text Types. Now, this is called a dialog launcher, and it's called that because if you click on it, it actually launches a dialog, in this case, the Type Properties dialog, where you could configure things about your type properties. Now, I'm not going to change anything there. I'm just simply going to click Cancel, but I just wanted you to be on the lookout for these small little dialog launcher icons, and they do occur in other locations as well. Here's one on the Insert tab on the Import panel. Now let's go back to the Architecture tab and talk about the different kinds of buttons. Even with all these buttons and controls, really everything on the ribbon boils down to three basic kinds of buttons. The simplest form of button is what you see here with like the door and the window commands. When I highlight it, the button highlights, and if I click it, it just does one thing. It launches the door command. Now over here on the Model tab, I have another kind of button, which is actually called a drop-down button. So here, when I highlight this Model Group command and click it, instead of it running a command, it actually opens up a little miniature menu. And you can see that there's several items on this menu. And then when you choose any one of these, they would behave the same way as the door or window button did. It would create a group or load a group and so on. Now, over here on the Wall command, you're actually going to see a combination of the two. The top half of the button, if you click it, just runs the Wall command. Now, if you've gone ahead and clicked it, I'm going to just simply click this Modify tool here to cancel that command without doing anything. And then I'm going to show you the second half of that button, the drop-down portion of it, which actually expands out a little miniature menu. Now, I should point out that a lot of times whenever people see this little drop-down, they always click it. And there's nothing really wrong with doing that. This first item right here is exactly the same as this item here. So if you know you want to create an architectural wall, you can actually just click the top half of the button without using the drop-down. But if you use the drop-down, no big deal. It's just an extra click. Now, any of these buttons and controls that you see can be added to the QAT, or the Quick Access Toolbar. Now, that's that toolbar that we see up there at the top of the screen. Now, there's already some buttons here. We've got Open, we've got Save, we've got Undo and Redo, but we've got a series of other commands over here as well. You can actually add any of the commands on the ribbon to that Quick Access Toolbar by simply right-clicking them. So for example, if I wanted to add the Ceiling command to the Quick Access Toolbar, I could choose this item, and you could see it adds that button to the toolbar. Now you can see that I'm not going to have much room here before I run out of space if I start adding a lot of commands. So it's actually possible to right-click anywhere on the quick access toolbar itself and choose this item here to show it below the ribbon. And it will move that QAT down underneath the ribbon, and you now have all this space over here that you can add commands to. So if you like to use the buttons, but you don't like having to switch ribbon tabs, this can be a nice way to do that because you can add your favorite commands to the QAT and move it down here so that you have room for them all. Now, at the very end of the QAT is this little drop down, which offers you another way to customize the QAT. So for example, one of the things you could do is come down here and choose this customize option. And you can see that this dialog allows you to actually start grouping the commands. And you can even incorporate these little separators here in between groups of commands. And they show up here in the background as these little vertical lines, which just makes it a little bit easier to kind of visually group the different commands. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cancel this, and I'm going to remove that ceiling command that I added, and then I'm going to move this quick access toolbar back up above the ribbon and just kind of reset myself. But feel free to do any of those customizations I showed you if it suits your workflow a little bit more closely. So the ribbon is your primary user interface element in Revit. All of the Revit commands are located there. And then the quick access toolbar just provides you shortcuts to many of your most frequently used commands, and you can actually customize that to suit your own needs and preferences.